Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
An Egyptian court has sentenced one of the country's most prominent pro-democracy activists to 15 years in prison. The sentence against Abdel-Fattah is the harshest that any secular activist has received for partaking in the uprising that ended Hosni Mubarak's 29-year reign. On Wednesday, the court found Abdel-Fattah guilty of illegal protests and attacking a police officer. 24 other defendants charged in the case received the same 15-year sentence. In March, Democracy Now! Correspondent Sharif Abdel-Quddus spoke to him when he was released on bail.
We have plans to fight this, both in court and out of court, obviously. I mean, these are not real courtrooms. This is not true justice. So you have to exert political pressure via protesting, via exposing the irregularities in the process, and so on.
That was Abdel-Fattah being interviewed by Democracy Now! Correspondent Sharif Abdel-Quddus in March. Well, Allah was just sentenced to 15 years in prison. It's the first conviction of a prominent activist since former Army Chief Abdel-Fattah El-Sisi took office as president on Sunday. For more, we go directly to Cairo, where we're joined by Abdel-Fattah, prominent Egyptian writer, the aunt of Abdel-Fattah, and we're joined by Sharif Abdel-Quddus, Democracy Now!'s correspondent in Cairo. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Well, let's turn first to Allah's aunt, to Abdel-Fattah. Your response to this sentence?
Well, the sentence is completely ridiculous. I mean, the charges are trumped up, and everybody knows that. And then, 15 years for protesting is, one hardly knows how to comment. The trial hadn't even started. Alaa was waiting outside, waiting to be called in for the trial to start. The lawyers were registering and going through the security procedure, and then they heard that the judge had convened the court, the empty court, I guess, an hour early, and had sentenced them to 15 years. And then they were picked up from the coffee shop outside where they were waiting. So, not only is the content completely ludicrous, but even the procedures that they used to be so keen on have now been thrown away.
And the accusation that he participated in assault on a police officer, what is your understanding of what actually happened?
He didn't. I mean, this is... The state has repeatedly accused Alaa of violent crimes, which they have never been able to prove. So at one point they accused him of setting fire to a presidential candidate's headquarters, and of course they were never able to prove that. And before that, in the Maspero events in October 2011, they accused him of destroying an armored personnel carrier and taking all the weapons that were inside. And then when they were challenged as to where the weapons were, they said, oh, he threw them in the river. The thing is absurd beyond absurdity. He did not attack a police officer, he did not steal a walkie-talkie or a gun or whatever it is he's supposed to have stolen, and he did not even call for the protest that he's supposed to have called for, because it was called for by the group No to Military Trials for Civilians, and they have claimed this call, and they have reported themselves to the police and to the prosecutor's office and said that the call came from them, and all that had happened was that he was there, as were tens of other people, when the protest took place. So 15 years, they just want to put him away. They just want him off the streets before they continue with their whatever parliamentary elections or whatever it is that's coming next.
His baby was born while he was in jail. Sharif Abdel-Quddus, this, though, is the first act of the new president of Iraq, of General Abdel-Sisi. Can you explain the significance of Egypt? Can you explain the significance of this?
Well, the ruling did come down 3 days into Abdel-Fattah el-Sisi's presidency. It was issued by this court. I think it's important to remember also that Alaa had asked that the judge recuse himself from the case. Alaa had protested this very judge in 2005 on accusations that the judge was part of rigging the 2005 parliamentary elections as well. What happens to Alaa has almost become a barometer of repression in Egypt. He has the distinction of being persecuted by the past 4 successive regimes, by Mubarak, by the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, by Morsi, and now by Abdel-Fattah al-Sisi. I was at that protest, covering it when it happened. It was a 100% peaceful protest that was very swiftly attacked by the police. It happened 2 days after this draconian protest law was issued by an unelected government that it effectively prohibits peaceful protest in Egypt. They arrested Ala a few days later. He was imprisoned for 115 days. Before he was brought to trial before a judge. They released him on bail, and now he's been sentenced again to this ridiculous 15 years in prison, him and 24 other people. Abdel-Fattah al-Sisi himself has said that he's going to uphold this protest law, that he's going to have a zero-tolerance policy for what he calls people who want to, quote-unquote, disrupt the state. And we have to remember that Abdel-Fattah al-Sisi came to power on the back of massive protests against Morsi, and now is effectively banning these protests. And all of this is a part of a much wider campaign clamping down on any opposition, any voices of dissent, has targeted tens of thousands of people, many Muslim Brotherhood members as well. The courts have handed down hundreds of death sentences to Muslim Brotherhood supporters, and it really brings to mind a quote by George Orwell's 1984, where he says, if you want to imagine a picture of the future, if you want a picture of the future, then imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
Well, in other news from Egypt, an Egyptian court on Wednesday extended the detention of an Al Jazeera Arabic journalist, Abdullah alShami, for an additional 45 days. alShami has been on hunger strike for nearly 5 months and has reportedly lost over 1/3 of his body weight. In a video taken before his transfer to solitary, a frail-looking alShami said he has been denied medical treatment.
Record this video after I have reached 106 days of my hunger strike to hold the Egyptian government, the Egyptian judiciary, and the general prosecutor my responsibility if anything ever happens to me. I have requested several medical checkups from independent sources, and yet this has not been provided.
For more, we're joined by Abdullah al-Shami's brother, Mohammed al-Shami, who is here in New York to study just for a few weeks. Mohammed, how is your brother doing? You just recently left Egypt.
My brother's health is not it's not really good because after he began his hunger strike on the 21st of January, the police tried to press on him to get away from the strike, to stop it, because they think that's what's putting pressure on the government from internal government, human rights bodies, or external from the West. They threatened him several times. When I was in Egypt, he told me this, that he threatened by few police officers that he was going to be sent to solitary confinement if he doesn't stop his hunger strike, because it's making them headache. That's what they told him. And after a few pictures of him were leaked last May while he was in the prison, and the video that is 1 month old, he was then moved to Scorpions prison, and that's a maximum security prison, and it's one of the most dangerous prisons in Egypt, and it's for the thugs and for the armed killers. But unfortunately now, after the military coup in Egypt, we're having journalists put in, and this was the same prison where Peter Greste, Mohammed Fahmy, and Bahir Mohammed were in before the free agent staff that just helped them to get into a public.
In fact, Sharif, you just saw Mohammed Fahmy, the Al Jazeera English reporter, yesterday in court or jail?
Right. Yes, that's a separate case, yeah. It's the Al Jazeera English journalist Mohammed Fahmy. He was actually taken from prison to a private hospital for a scan on his shoulder, which was injured prior to his arrest, but the injury was exacerbated by his imprisonment and his arrest. He said, I've effectively been given a life sentence because he has a permanent disability now in his shoulder. Their next session in their trial is on June 16th. The prosecutor has wrapped up their case, has called for the maximum penalty, the maximum sentence to be imposed, which is up to 15 years in prison for these 3 journalists. So it's a difficult time now in Egypt. And also there's another prisoner who's on hunger strike as well. He's a U.S. citizen, a dual citizen, U.S. and Egyptian. His name is Mohammed Sultan. He actually campaigned for Barack Obama in 2008 and moved to Egypt in 2013. He was shot in the arm by police during the dispersal of the Rabaa sit-in, the pro-Morsi sit-in, and was arrested 10 days later. He's lost over 40 kilos in weight. That's something like 90 pounds. He's restricted to a wheelchair now, and his health is in very, very serious danger.
We have to leave it there.